Welcome back. And this is part two of the personal dimension before we move on to the other one. So I know I said we were moving on, but we actually have one more conversation to have here about the personal dimension. So we're looking at this part and just the interesting thing, thinking about the personal dimension. There's this, someone asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? So Jesus says, starting in verse 29, the most important one is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." This comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength." And then he says, the second is this, "Love your neighbor as yourself," which comes from the book of Leviticus. "There is no commandment greater than these." It's interesting that they said, which of the one is the most important? And Jesus tells them two. But what is even more interesting is when you highlight these things, look at what Jesus is saying. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and your neighbor. And we're going to highlight those over the next few slides here as we go along. So how are we made? When we think about ourselves and the way that we're formed, there are many ways to kind of think about our whole being. It's important to remember that we are a whole being. We're not just a brain. We're not just a body. We're whole. Like there's more to us than just that meets the eye, so to speak. We are a multiplicity of things inside of us. And even we are a kind of a biosystem in ourselves. And this is a side conversation for another time, but with all the the microbiomes that we have inside of us and the bacteria, we actually are a community within ourselves. There's so many things going on inside of us that we don't even realize or know, that living organisms are helping us digest our food and different things. It's crazy if you start thinking about how integrated and how diverse we are just even among ourselves. So we are, when I think of me, I'm actually should be thinking of a we, because there's more to me than this. But anyway, sorry, I digress. We are a heart. It's at our core. It's who we are. It's kind of the bedrock of where we make choices, and how we decide things. We then have a mind, and we need to understand too that our mind and our brain are different, because we can think about thoughts and we can also let thoughts go. So if a thought came to me right now that said, go eat a chocolate chip cookie, I don't have to act on that thought. So just because I think something or a thought goes through my mind doesn't mean that I have to act on that. That's really important when we think about discipleship. And as we think about thoughts that may lead us towards sin, we don't have to act on those thoughts. They come and go, and we can just let them go along. But we also then are a body. Our body actually lives out into the world, our heart and our mind, like the things that we think of and that we do. We act it out in who we are in the body that we have. We also live in a context of relationships. We're part of a family. We're part of a community. We live in a city. We are connected, and you are connected. Even if you don't think you are, when you drive to the grocery store, you're connected to all the people around you, because you're trusting every one of those other drivers to do what they're supposed to do and not go crazy and cross the road the wrong time or whatever. Like, we do live in relationships. And finally, we have this idea that sort of holds them all together, or as one spiritual leader talks about it, it's like the bucket that holds everything together. And that's our soul. It's who we are, the whole person, all the parts working together. Paul, the Apostle Paul says in Romans 12:2, this idea of don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And again, we don't have time. We can talk about this in the discussion if you'd like this week, but there is so much that people are learning about neuroscience and the way that we have this idea of neuroplasticity. We can change the way we think. We can change the way we are by changing the way we think. So Paul had this right way back in the first century, that there is opportunities we have to completely transform who we are, and our brains continue to develop. It's not something that ends. So here are a few things that we can do to kind of help think through our who we are and how we work that, how we make change. So we can have a dream, we can have a vision, we can look forward into what it is that we might want to see happen in our lives. So what is your dream? What is your vision? What do you want to accomplish with your life? Start thinking about those kind of things. And then we also need to set some intentions. We need to say, okay, this is what I'm intentionally trying to do. It's interesting. I use the Nike Run Club app when I'm running, and one of the things that often the coach will say in your earbuds as you're running along is say, "What's your intention for this run? What are you hoping to get out of it?" Well, that's a great question, even just for something like a run. But what's the intention for this degree that you're studying? Why are you wanting to do this? It's interesting that we have that James Clear, who's written a book called Atomic Habits, and I highly recommend it when you're done with this course. He said, we don't rise to our goals, but we sink or fall to the level of our systems. And so what's our intention? Like, we got to put systems in place to make things work. Then we have to have a means, like, what are the ways that we can accomplish this? How do we get to what we want to do? And just simply doing those kind of things. So I'll use an example. As a runner, I had to go out and buy some running shoes, some really good running shoes, not cheap ones. And that made all the difference. And as part of my intention, every night before I go to bed, I put my shoes and socks by the door. I have my clothes laid out on a chair in our bedroom. And so when I stumble out of bed and I'm kind of groggy and half asleep, it's easy to get dressed. It's easy to walk to the front door. It's easy to put on my shoes. And sometimes literally, I'm like going down our road when I realize that I'm like running. And I've made that intentionality, and I've provided the means. We also have to create space. We have to say, okay, this is something I want to give time to. And that space might be in our day. It's not going to happen if we don't create the space. And that's hard. It's really hard. We're super busy, but we also have lots of time when we're just wasting time. And we can create space to make these habits change. So as we're thinking particularly about our own spiritual growth and discipleship, one interesting thing that we can do is to memorize scripture. And I know you might think, what? I can't memorize anything. If I bet if I could start playing a song and one that and then I stop the music, the lyrics would just keep on going, right? We memorize things all the time. It's just something we have to work at. We also need to think about, what images do we surround ourselves with? How do we view things? That's really important. And then what kind of music do we listen to? Is it building us up? Is it helping us? And I'm not advocating for only listening to Christian music all the time. I don't listen to Christian music all the time. I listen to a wide variety, but I also recognize that what I'm bringing in, what I'm listening to does impact and who I am and part of my discipleship. Who's mentoring you? Who are the people that you're looking after or following, and who's investing in your life? Another way to do that is just to keep reviewing and thinking through the things that we're learning and the things that we're engaged with. That also shapes us and changes us. Recognize that it's the little things that make a difference. Atomic Habits is called Atomic Habits because he's talking about these atom-size, things that we can put into place that make a huge difference in our lives. So I want to encourage you to not just think, oh, I've got to change all these big things. Well, I'm going to just go to the gym every day. Just start small and stay consistent. I know it went beyond just the idea of spiritual discipleship, but everything we've talked about, it's forming us into being people. And I said that from the very beginning. We are being formed. How are we being formed? I encourage you to read Atomic Habits. I encourage you to think broadly about why you're doing the things you're doing. What's your intention? And set those and make sure that those are in place. We've got a couple more videos left in this unit, so let's move on to the next one.